This has been Pocket Swap. One of my favorite garments to sew and wear are jumpsuits. And the Paper Theory Zadie Jumpsuit is my favorite all-time pattern. I've made 3 so far just from the same printed pattern, and you bet I want to make another version. I love the pockets in here, but I want to try a little pocket swap, I'm calling it. So I'm going to be taking the pocket shape from the Pagosa pants, which is a patch pocket that goes on top, and I am going to implement that on the Zadie jumpsuit. I already have sewn and I have the pattern printed out for both, so I'm just gonna swap the pocket pattern pieces, and I don't have to print out a new pattern or do any more paper tiling and cutting. Really excited for that patch pocket look, so it'll be a little bit different from all of my other ones. So let's get started. So once I cut and sew a pattern that's digital, I like to store them in an envelope with a little sketch, the title, and what size it's cut in. So I keep the instructions and all of the pattern pieces inside. And just a quick little tip is when you unfold them, you can actually lightly press the paper. So before I cut them out on my fabric or do any sort of modifications, I just give it a light press, and I do it on the wrong side because sometimes depending on your printer ink, it can actually transfer to the iron plate. So I always just make sure it's the ink side down, and it will get rid of all those creases. So I've already done that to my Zadie pants pattern, and this version I'm gonna do the short sleeve version. There are 2 versions, one with the long sleeve and one with the short sleeve, and since the weather is starting to get nice out, I need another short sleeve version. I only have one, so I'm super excited to have one of those. So I have my pocket bag pieces and my front piece. These are the only pieces that you need to modify to do this pocket swap. So if I'm looking at the sketch, you can see right here, the back of the pocket actually extends into the waistline and that hip area. So if we're going to put a patch pocket on and eliminate that hip pocket, we need to get that width back on our pants pattern. So the pocket bag piece looks like this, and you want to make sure you reference this notch up here as well as this along the side seam. So the pocket gets sewn something like that to the pattern. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just underlay and overlay my pieces. And you need to note that this has seam allowance included, and this pattern has 3/8 of an inch. So what you want to do is you can either mark or just eyeball. I'm just kind of eyeballing it because as sewing for so long, you just kind of know what 3/8 looks like. So I'm just gonna overlay them with this notch, 3/8 of an inch, and then I just blend it down into the side seam. So I have my notch here, and then I just pin my paper pattern pieces together. You can tape them, but I always have bad luck with that when I'm untaping it, because I'll want to eventually cut another one with that pocket piece so I don't rip up the paper. So now you can just go ahead and cut out your front Zadie as is, and then just make sure this will extend. So just fold that down, and you have your full front piece, eliminating and accommodating for that hip pocket. So I grabbed my pocket piece for my Pagosa pants, and I cut that out in the fabric I'm going to use. I'm using this fabulous organic green linen, and this will just get sewn, and this is a pleat right here. So I think I'm gonna line it up with the pleat. You can even mark on your paper pattern where you want your pocket to be. So on the pattern, it gets pleated like this. So I think I might put the pocket, maybe fit it in fit it in here. So at this point, go ahead and cut out your Zadie, and then we can start sewing it together with a patch pocket style. I already have mine cut out, so I'm just going to start pinning it together so we can sew it. So I have my front piece right here. And with this fabric, like a lot of linens, the right side and wrong side of the fabric look pretty much identical. And I always cut my pieces right sides together. So I just put a pin so I always know what my right side is until I've sewn enough where I can establish that. And so with right sides together, we first pin our pleats in place. And on the pattern, it's always referenced to the right side up, and the pleats are going towards the side seam. So I'm just going to pin those in place. Back Zadie. So now I'm gonna head over to my machine and I'm gonna baste those pleats in place and then finish my pocket edges to put on my front pants, and then we'll sew up the side seam catching the pocket in our piece. So let me thread up that machine in green thread. So I went ahead and sewed both of my legs and then stitched my crotch seam right sides together. And note on the Zadie jumpsuit, there's this little notch that you want to make sure you backstitch well at the front. And then when you're serging it, you want to cut off your serging just before the crotch point, because we're going to finish that later once the bias binding is on. And I really love that patch pocket look. It's just gives the Zadie a whole new feel. So it kind of differentiates itself from all of my other ones that I have. You could even cut this patch pocket in a contrasting fabric or a print. I think it'll be super cool, but it just gives it that different look. And I love the Pagosa pant pocket. It's so classic and it's super easy to sew. So if you're kind of intimidated by pockets and you're stitching maybe your first jumpsuit, this is actually an easier pocket to wrap your head around than that hip pocket with the integrated pocket lining bag and everything. So if you're kind of new to pockets, sew one of these, or you can just combine that pocket bag pattern in the front and then don't even sew any pockets at all. Everyone needs to make a Zadie, no matter what skill level you are. So next, the thing to do is I have my pants all finished, and I also have my bodice all sewn too. So now it's time to put them right sides together and stitch along our waistline seam. And I just like to pin mark those pleats. Those pleats should go right on top of one another. So I pin all my landmarks. And it's also great how this pocket piece fits up with that pleat notch so well. Pin my side seams together, my center back and those pleats. Now on the one side seam of your bodice, you cut a little slit and stitch it for the belt to go through. So when you're pinning it to that one side seam, you just want to pin those top stitched press edges right on either side of that seam. So at your sewing machine, you start at one edge and you go all around the waistline. Now, while I'm at the sewing machine, I'm also going to stitch my belts together. The instructions say to stitch it right sides together and turn it right side out, but I like to just press in the edges and then top stitch it. I find that it works better, and I don't like to turn things inside out, especially with linen. It can get so crinkly, and since it's in a loose open weave, the safety pin or your turning device can actually rip a hole in your fabric. I've done that one too many times. So I just press it together. And it's tempting to sew these belt pieces together along that short seam, but you actually need two separate belts to sew to each one of the fronts. So just press it wrong sides together. Then I press these little edges to the inside. If you have a more stable woven or maybe even a firm knit, you don't have to do this, but I find for if you're sewing this in double gauze or linens, I just find it easier to do the belts this way. And then you just press in the allowance on each side and pin together and top stitch. And when you get to the straight edge, that's actually the end of the belt loop. So before I press it and pin it all together, with the allowances on either side pressed, I'm just going to press up. And then you can fold together, kind of tucking in those ends. And then work around pinning those pressed edges together. And then you just top stitch around the entire belt. You save so much time pressing after. And then this angled edge is what is sewn to the jumpsuit. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish pressing and pinning my belt, and then we'll head over to the sewing machine and sew our belt and the rest of our jumpsuit together. And then I think I'm gonna be ready for a try on. So excited. Turned out. I really like these Pagosa patch pockets on my Zadie jumpsuit. It's different than all my other Zadies. They have this side hip pocket so you don't see the top stitching, but I love the green top stitching on my version, so the pocket really works great. So while my Zadie jumpsuit and my Pagosa pants patterns are already out in my studio, to finish this pocket swap, it's only natural that I sew a Zadie hip pocket with that integrated pocket pouch in the pattern into my Pagosa pants. I'm so excited to see the end result, and maybe I'll keep those patterns together so I can do this more often. So head over to sewdaily.com or click the link in the description of this video to see how I finished up my Zadie jumpsuit with the bias binding. I have a little trick when finishing that over and underlap area, as well as all the steps that I do to sew my Zadie pocket into my Pagosa pants. I love a good pocket swap. So make sure to check it out, and thank you for watching Style Revive.